What's up, everybody? Demon back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we are going to be doing it's sort of a replacement Godzilla-Thon because I have Tokyo SOS coming up in 2 weeks, and I know that I really need to see the original Mothra to understand that movie and to be able to accurately review it. I decided I had to go back and watch Mothra from 1961, so this will be filling in for Godzilla-Thon this week. Don't worry, Godzilla-Thon's not done. I will be doing Godzilla-Thon next week. We will be picking up with Godzilla Against Godzilla. Now this time we're going to be reviewing Mothra, and you might say, well, why didn't you talk about this before Mothra vs. Godzilla? Why didn't you review this movie then? I didn't own it then, so now that I own it, I can do the review, and this was actually my first time watching this, so this is almost a first impression review. It's just that this first impression review has the same format of Godzilla-Thon. I will be doing the same thing I do with that, breaking down the plot, talking about what I think about it. Now, I will admit, I was a little disappointed in this movie for a couple reasons. Number one, the music. It's immediately noticeable that there's a lack of Ifukube doing the music. It's noticeable right off the bat. The music's different from what I'm used to, a lot more different. I'm used to Ifukube's Mothra scores, and I really I miss those blaring trumpets when Mothra's destroying things. I really do. This movie just doesn't have the Mothra feel to me because the music's off. It just isn't the music I'm used to. Which I know technically this movie came out before Ifukube had ever scored Mothra, and this movie does give us the amazing Mothra song, the theme, but I don't know, it doesn't have the right feel to me without Ifukube. The music was done by Yuki Kosaki, which, you know, he's fine. The music is fine in this movie, it doesn't have the Mothra feel to me. This movie was directed by Ishiro Honda, which is good news, and the special effects were done by Eiji Tsuburaya. Now, I don't think the special effects in this movie are comparable to Mothra vs. Godzilla. I think they are significantly worse, and I will talk about why later on. I just generally don't think this movie has the greatest special effects. I think it's a bit too ambitious, which is one of its problems, but at the same time, that's one of the best aspects about the movie, so it's a little bit of a mixed bag. This movie starts out with a very Mothra-esque trait of a typhoon hitting Japan. Now, we will get used to this in the Mothra series. By the way, this is the first episode of Mothra-A-Thon. No, Mothra-A-Thon will not be taking place during Godzilla-Thon. I'm just doing the first review for Mothra-A-Thon during Godzilla-Thon. I have no idea when I'll start Mothra-A-Thon. I will just start it at some point in the future. Well, technically I'm starting it right now, but I have no idea when I'll continue it. I think I'm going to give it some time, maybe next year. That way I can go back and torture myself a little bit by having to sit through the Mothra Godzilla movies as well. And the only reason I say torture is because I just realized that would mean I have to sit back through Ebra Horror of the Deep. However, I did get that movie on Blu-ray, so now I can actually review what's on screen, because my VHS was so dark I hardly saw anything half the time. So it'll be interesting, to say the least, the fact that I'll be going back and re-reviewing Godzilla movies as part of Mothra-A-Thon, or at least that's kind of what I'm debating right now, because I don't know if I want to just do that, or if what I want to do is just Mothra Rebirth series and then end it. I kind of do like the idea of doing the Godzilla movies as well, because Mothra is a prominent character in those movies. I'll definitely have to wait a while so that I don't have to do movies like Final Wars just a couple weeks after I just reviewed Final Wars. At that point, I might as well just re-upload the video. However, I will wait a while and then re-record a review, so that not only can you hear my updated thoughts, but you can also hear me rate Godzilla movies on a Mothra scale, which is a little bit of a higher scale, because Godzilla movies I have on their own sort of scale. I rate Godzilla movies as Godzilla movies. I rate them against other Godzilla movies. I don't rate them against anything else. These Mothra movies I'll be rating against just sci-fi movies, just tokusatsu movies. So they will be getting higher ratings, which is funny because I always rate the Godzilla movies pretty high anyways, but that's just because I love Godzilla. So that would mean like you're getting 10 out of 10s for some of these Godzilla movies in the Mothra category. Or maybe they'll be lacking because Mothra isn't the main character, and maybe in cases like Ebra Horror of the Deep, I'll count that against the movie. Who knows? It's very interesting to think about. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. So the movie starts out with a typhoon hitting Japan. A boat is sunken in the ocean, forcing some of the crew to swim to an irradiated island called Infant Island. First off, the opening is pretty cool. I love the fact that you have this fear of these atomic test zones. The radiation aspect is very prominent in the start of this movie. Absolutely love it. Shiro Honda is killer with allegory. And I really like the carryover from this movie to Mothra vs. Godzilla, which is funny because the only reason I watched this was so that I could review Tokyo SOS. But I really like the carryover, the continuity that is carried over from this movie into Mothra vs. Godzilla. That being that Infant Island was this nuclear test zone and there's only small patches of green land. However, in Mothra vs. Godzilla, there's a lot less green land than there is in this movie. In this movie, as we'll talk about, it's kind of like a paradise on the island that's just hidden away by radiation. 4 crew members are saved from the wasteland. Like a helicopter comes and picks them up or something. Surprisingly, they don't have any radiation sickness. This is a big deal for scientists. The survivors theorize that the reason they are in good health is because the natives of the island gave them some red berry juice. Now it's not stated as red berry juice, but it's red juice. But I mean, it's might as well be the red berry juice from Faroe Island, right? That only came out a year later. So this is like the weird government. I'm just probably gonna call it the United States in the movie or when I do the review, but the Rolisican government takes no responsibility for testing H-bombs on an inhabited island. They said that no, there were no people there when we were there, so anyone who's there now came after we bombed the island. So the Rolisican government is basically a stand-in for America in this movie. You know, it's this big world power. They test atomic weapons, hydrogen weapons. They are also English speaking, and I think they might be white. Some of them are white anyways. Nelson, the main character from that country, isn't, but for the most part the characters are like they're Americans, you know? They speak English, they're white, they don't have like British accents, they have American accents. So this movie clearly is using the Rolisican government as a stand-in for America. It's like their own made-up government. That way the movie wouldn't be directly criticizing America, but it would be still criticizing the country. So they don't take any responsibility for it. Now, Chujo, a scientist, is questioned about an expedition to the island. Now, he's played by Mirai from Mothra vs. Godzilla, which made it incredibly hard for me to do this review, because every single time he was on screen, when I was taking notes, I wrote the word Mirai, and I had to scribble that out. Nope, not the same character. At least I'm like 99% sure it's the same actor. If it's not, that's my bad. I don't know who he is then. But he's definitely a returning actor from Toho. He's definitely been in a lot of these Toho science fiction movies. No, I just checked on IMDb. This is definitely Mirai, so it's the same actor, so it's all good. I know what I'm talking about. Every single time he's on screen, though, because he's a reoccurring character, he's one of the only reoccurring characters in both Mothra vs. Godzilla and Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. It was super confusing for me watching this movie and seeing this guy and being like, no, that's Mirai. Like, I don't know why they wouldn't have just had the character from Mothra vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, be this character, be Shujo. I mean, he's the same character, right? He's a scientist. He's kind of withdrawn. Although Mirai's more kind of I don't know, for lack of better terms, grumpy. He's more like over it, whereas this Shujo is more like more into life. He's more enthusiastic. So Shujo is questioned about an expedition to the island. A man named Nelson shows up in Japan saying that he will lead the expedition to the island because they're going there to check out if there are any natives and do some scientific studies as to why the sailors didn't have any radiation sickness. There's a big send-off to Infant Island, and the shots of people celebrating as the boat takes off is a direct recreation of Yamane's expedition to Odo Island in Godzilla. And by that I mean the camera angle and the way the boat is filmed and all the confetti going up above hand and all the people standing there, the crowd. It's an exact recreation of the shot from the original Godzilla when Yamane is going out to Odo Island. Zen, the main reporter of the movie, sneaks aboard the ship. He finds out Nelson is up to something, and Nelson winds up holding Zen at gunpoint. He's this is me speculating. I said he's most likely a Rolisican spy. He kind of doesn't turn out to be that, but Obviously, it's my first time watching the movie. I had to speculate when taking notes. So Shujo isn't having it. He shows up and is like, hey, put that gun down, idiot. A large team heads out on the island. I like how many people go. Like, usually in these movies, it's like 4 or 5 people. But in this movie, they send, like, the whole scientific committee. Like, there's, like, 100 people that go on the island. There's a lot of people. Very realistic. Beyond the desolate front of the island is a green paradise. It is massive compared to what it is as seen in later Showa movies. Nelson has some sort of strange map of the island, however this little subplot is not explored throughout the movie. Zen is spying on him when he's looking at the map. Shujo finds a cave that leads him into a cavern with some writing inside. The writing will become very integral to the plot later. Shujo is attacked by a plant, a blood-sucking plant of some sort, and as he's being attacked, he passes out. The final thing he sees is a glimpse of 2 small girls who apparently saved him. The next day, using sound devices, Mothra's fairies are discovered. They speak in this weird sound code. I don't really like it. Like, they just kind of like, when they open their mouth, it just blares this annoying music. It's pretty annoying. They only speak in noise, no dialogue, no words at this point in the movie. They must learn very quick, because, like, an hour later, they're speaking Japanese. Nelson grabs the girls and holds everyone at gunpoint. Obviously, he's not a good guy. I don't know how they didn't see that coming. The girls start emitting this familiar song. It's the Mothra song. They don't sing the words to it, they just sing the tune. The song attracts natives on the island who hold up the scientific team until the girls are let go. The team goes back to Japan and Nelson goes away. He disappears. Zen figures out he's an artifacts dealer and he's exploiting women from different countries. Nelson goes back to the island and kidnaps the girls. Then, him and his men open fire on the natives, which is a brutal scene of them just gunning down the natives of the island. There's talk of something called Mothra, and this thing called Mothra is so important that a man prays to it as he dies. Suddenly, an egg is revealed after a giant wall of rock crashes down around this little village. Nelson publishes pictures of the girls and turns them into an attraction. People go crazy for the fairies as they pray to Mothra. Turns out Nelson paid off the Rolisican government for the expedition and the fairies, so he masterminded everything. The prayer is heard by the natives through telepathy, who sing to a giant egg. The prayer is Mothra's song. Nelson is being all evil and he says that the fairies don't deserve human rights because they are his possessions. Nelson lets Zen and Shujo and Zen's assistant, the girl, I forgot her name. I didn't think I even wrote it down because she doesn't play an important part in the plot. She's there a lot, but she doesn't do anything. Which is weird because usually in Ishiro Honda movies, the women have much more prominent roles than they do in this movie. And this movie's more geared towards women because Mothra is more of a girl's kaiju, which is, I don't know, she just has more feminine appeal, I guess. Maybe because a lot of the times Mothra's portrayed as a female kaiju. In this movie, Mothra's actually a male, but I think it also has something to do with the 2 twin fairies. So either way, it's just weird seeing a female character in this movie not have anything to do. So they go in there and they talk to the fairies, and the fairies start speaking Japanese. The fairies warn that death is coming until they are freed. Mothra hatches. Mothra is headed towards Japan. Mothra is like kind of evil in this movie. She's not evil per se. She just doesn't care. The fairies even say she does not know right from, or I guess he does not know right from wrong. It's an insect. Like he's just gonna go where he goes. And they do explain that the only thing that he's looking for is them. So the fairies are like this beacon that attracts Mothra through telepathy. Mothra proves that he's kind of evil in this movie because he destroys a cruise ship, killing a whole bunch of innocent passengers. Zen beats up Nelson's guards, which is crazy because Zen's kind of a fatty, so it's crazy to see him kick butt and do all this karate. Shujo talks with the fairies who say Mothra will save them at all costs. Some sort of weird material is developed to block telepathic waves from Mothra. The JSDF attacks Mothra, and Nelson refuses to use the telepathic blocking wave things. They built this little cage out of it. He refuses to use it on the fairies for some unknown reason. So, by the way, Mothra takes ages to show up in this movie. Like, we're almost done with the movie, and Mothra just showed up. Has been on screen very little. He hatches out of the egg. You see some clips of him swimming in the ocean. He destroys this cruise ship in like 3 seconds. And then the military attacks him, just dropping bombs in the water. The larva doesn't look great in this movie. It doesn't have its standard look yet. They're still yet to find that normal look for the the larva, it just kind of has this weird, like, lumpy look to it. It's not fully textured like it will be later on. Mothra surfaces in Japan flooding a dam. This is actually a very well-handled sequence with some great tension as you think a baby's about to be drowned on a bridge. The fairies are boxed up and Zen saves the baby, so now the fairies can no longer emit telepathic waves to Mothra. Shujo's kid brother, apparently, like, geez, Shujo's like a 30-year-old man, like, at least 30. Like, he's probably older than that, and his kid brother is like 7 to 12, somewhere in that range. It's really awkward. Now, this kid brother rescues Mothra's fairies, or at least he attempts to. The Rolisican government asks Nelson to give up Mothra's fairies. Now, they are no longer backing Nelson. Shujo's brother, his name is Shinji, is kidnapped by Nelson, and it's almost like he's beaten, he's gagged, and they place all these chairs on top of him, and he's just left in this room. But he's been left knocked out, so we don't know how he got knocked out. Mothra's back on the hunt for the fairies. The larva, like I said, has a very weird design in this movie. Mothra destroys Tokyo, fighting some tanks. The special effects during this sequence are very impressive for the time, and the scale is fairly good. It actually feels very massive until you kind of pull back and you see the faraway shots and you realize that Mothra's pretty small and the destruction isn't that wide scale compared to what Godzilla can do. Mothra is ambushed at Tokyo Tower and forced to shoot this cocoon web all over the place. Tokyo Tower is destroyed, or at least the top half of it falls down. That's due to the military is doing. Mothra didn't really have anything to do with that. Nelson tries to flee the country with the fairies. The JSDF and Rolisican government plan to use atomic heat rays on the cocoon. The Rolisians kind of take responsibility for this. They're like, oh shoot, this was kind of our fault. The attack commences and the cocoon is set on fire. This looks like a victory as Mothra is presumed dead. The radio broadcast that follows, announcing the victory in Japan, mentions Godzilla. This is an amazing reference. Not by name, but they do mention that Mothra will go down as one of the great monsters in Japan's history. This is an obvious reference to the fact that Godzilla exists in this universe. At this point in the Toho cinematic universe, if that's what you want to call it, there would exist a Godzilla, an Anguirus, and a Rodan. So it's really cool to see that now we have a Mothra added in there as well. I don't know if anyone else comes in between those movies, but at this point, anyways, in 1961, we do know that there is at least 2 Godzillas, one of them that died in 54 and one of them that is frozen in ice as of 55. There is Rodan, 2 of them, who both are dead at this point in the timeline, and there's one Mothra. So it's really cool to hear them mention that there's other monsters in this universe. So actually one of the only tie-ins to another Showa Toho movie that we get in all of these kaiju movies. They rarely ever reference events from one another. So it's a really, really fantastic to hear them actually make reference to Godzilla, or presumably Godzilla. You know, they could be talking about Rodan. He would have attacked more recently, but I'm going to chalk that one up as a victory for Godzilla. Nelson flees the country and it works. He goes to live in the Rolisican country. Mothra Hatch is now full grown. Mothra's wings cause deadly windstorms as Mothra heads to Rolisia. So there's this funny thing where Mothra attacks a city called New Kirk City. Again, an obvious reference to the American city of New York City. This is a very non-subtle way of pointing the blame at America for all the hydrogen bombs tested in the area. And all the words, like all the street signs and everything, is written in English. Also, there is some fantastic attention to detail here, with Mothra flying over a city, cars on the street parked on the side of the street go flying into buildings. You see open signs on the buildings, like little neon signs. You see big bold letters, the building's names. There's so much attention to detail in these miniature sets in this movie. It's very impressive. Although I don't think, like I said earlier, I don't think that the special effects are all that fantastic. First of all, Mothra's design for the larva doesn't look good, and I don't think Mothra is as well handled as she is in later Showa movies, such as Mothra vs. Godzilla. And I think, like I said earlier, I think they were a little bit too ambitious. Although the Rolisian set, the New Kirk City set, looks very impressive and is very, very detailed, it doesn't look as good as a lot of the other sets we see in other Showa movies around this era, like King Kong vs. Godzilla, for instance. That one didn't really have any miniatures, but the pagoda looks a lot better than anything you see in this movie. And Tokyo in that movie with King Kong also looks a little better. And one thing that this movie doesn't do very well is insert something behind screens, so have that sort of overlay where you have real people in the front, Mothra in the background. Doesn't do that very well. I can't remember what that's called at the moment, but it doesn't do that very well with the blue screen where they insert the kaiju in the background with real humans in the foreground. They don't do that as well. Like, Mothra vs. Godzilla pulls that off, so it's like fantastic whenever that movie does. It looks great. This movie doesn't do that. It just looks very cheap. Nelson's gunned down by the police after shooting a cop and trying to run away with the fairies. Shujo comes up with a plan. The plan is to set up a beacon for Mothra after some similarities between the Islanders' religion and the Rolisican New Kirk City religion are noticed, aka the cross, and the sun kind of looks like Mothra's symbol, and the bells of the churches there sound like Mothra's song. While Mothra destroys New Kirk City, a beacon is set up. The plan works, and Mothra lands in an airfield. Turns out the plan was to paint a giant Mothra symbol on the landing strip of an airport or something, some airbase, and church bells would play Mothra's melody, attracting the monster. Mothra gets there and she finds the fairies. Finally, the fairies run to her and she takes them back to Infant Island, finally flying away. The movie ends with a final prayer being said for world peace. The prayer mentions that there is a hope that none of this will ever happen again. However, we know that in both timelines, Showa and Millennium, that prayer does not work. Of course, we know that Godzilla comes back in 1962, kills a whole bunch of people. King Kong shows up. Mothra will eventually have to go back and fight to her death. And we also know that in the Millennium timeline, Godzilla shows back up as well. I guess the Tokyo SOS Godzilla Mechagodzilla timeline. The human story in this movie is fairly good. Nelson's a bit over the top. He's kind of like way overly evil, more than you would expect. But the characters other than that are pretty fun. I really do like Shujo, and I do enjoy Zen. The kaiju stuff in this movie is lacking. Mothra isn't in the movie a lot, and she just doesn't bring a very menacing presence like Godzilla does, so you don't really feel any danger. Mothra just isn't scary. It's also kind of weird seeing her as the villain, or him. I'm going to mess that up every time. Seeing Mothra as the villain, because Mothra's always been portrayed as the good guy throughout the movies. And in the end of the movie, they do treat Mothra like the good guy, but it feels undeserved. It feels like Mothra just killed a whole bunch of people. Why would they treat him as the hero? He didn't do anything heroic. He just showed up and saved some fairies. Like, no one who died had a personal attachment to those fairies, so they all just died for no reason. It was all because of Nelson. The music in this movie is okay. Ifukube's stuff is a lot better, like I said. The effects are fairly well done, and the allegory is fantastic. I love the depth to this movie. I'm always a sucker for allegories, so you guys know that. And I do really like all the themes of different religions and people on the earth having to come together and unify. Overall, I think this movie's pretty solid. I'd give it a 7 or 8 out of 10. It's not bad. For a science fiction movie, I do think there are better. It's kind of weird because if I'm going to judge it based off science fiction movies of the time, I'm going to have to give it a higher score, like an 8 or 9. But if I'm going to judge it overall science fiction, this movie's it's 7 or 8. It's not the best, but it's still pretty fun. If I was going to judge it on the Godzilla scale, I'd probably judge it a 6 or 7 because it doesn't bring that same level of presence as Godzilla does. However, that one reference to Godzilla, even though he wasn't mentioned by name, was enough to make me very happy. Overall, this movie's not bad. I would recommend it to hardcore kaiju fans. However, I don't think if you're just a casual fan, you will enjoy this movie. Like I said, it takes a long time for her to even make her first appearance. So if you're one of those antsy people who just has to get to the kaiju scene, you're really going to be left disappointed. I do plan on watching this movie a lot more, though. It's definitely a good one. That does it for today's review, guys. See you guys next time for a movie I'm very familiar with. Can't wait. So, see you then for Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. D-Man.